Hello, good day. By watching this video, you will find out more about corporate immigration into Namibia. My colleague Andreas is here with me today. He will answer a few questions that we usually get from our corporate clients. The video is a little bit longer than we usually try, but there's a lot of fun and interesting information, so we hope you stick to the end and listen. So thanks, Andreas, for coming. I know you've been working on Namibia for a long time already. You've assisted some of our colleagues on some really big, interesting projects. So thanks for joining today. Maybe as an opener, you could just briefly explain how you would rate Namibia's immigration system and the practical implementation, and just explain why you rate them like this.
Yes, sure. Hello, everybody. I think I'm going to rate Namibia's immigration system a 6. I know in the other videos Melissa's rating usually higher, but firstly I rate usually lower. I rated it a 6, and I think later on in the video we will explain why. But I do have to say that recently things have improved compared to the old days, so maybe in half a year I rated a 7. Let's see.
Okay, thanks. And are there any industries or sectors that are exempt or maybe a bit more lenient in Namibia? And where does one actually submit the applications?
Yeah, so unlike its neighbor to the north, Angola's, Namibia doesn't have sector-specific requirements, not yet. Might change. They found lots of oil on the border to Angola, so it might change in the future. At the moment, they don't have sector-specific rules. And then the general principle is where we submit all the applications is in Windhoek, which is the capital, at the Minister of Home Affairs. So there is no consulate services. Also, Namibia doesn't have many consulates worldwide, so they're obviously centralizing everything in Namibia.
And how is the general adjudication? Do they make lots of mistakes, or do the applications...
It used to be terrible and super long, like long-term work permits used to take 6 months, short-term a month. With quite a few rejections. Our more recent experiences in the last half year, since they moved into a new headquarters, I don't know if it has something to do with that, but our short-term work visas at the moment take 2 weeks, which is, I think, really, really good. And the long-term ones are also coming out in a month, which is exceptional these days in Africa. So at the moment, they're doing well.
Okay. And maybe the most important question everybody wants to hear. So what are the different types of visitors and short-term and work visas, permits that are available in Namibia?
So let's start with visitor and then the short-term, right? So most nations get a visitor visa on entry. Like in other countries, that's for tourism purposes. You can get one for business purposes as well. Then you usually show an invitation letter, and then it's still a visitor visa. Normally it's limited to 90 days per year. Okay, so it's not that much actually, because South Africa you can get 180 days and even extend it further. But in Namibia it's normally 90 days per year, but you can extend it under certain circumstances. And then the short-term work visa is also 90 days, can be extended once. And I think, as I said, processing times is 2 weeks. So that's maybe the 2 short-term options, really.
Okay. And what are the typical activities allowed on a business visa or a tourist visa with business purpose? Also,
I think nothing out of the extraordinary. So attending conferences, attending training, business meetings, all this is the normal tourist/business visa. Third-party sites, machine repairs, or hands-on physical or mental work at your branch or at a client site usually would then be the short-term work permit. So very similar to a lot of African countries.
Okay. And then what are the options for long-term work permits?
Yeah, Namibia only has one option, which is the long-term work permit. It's very simple, one short-term, one long-term. It's issued for up to 2 years, and it does require an advertisement, so a local labor market checking. And that's the only option. So there's no ICT, there's no special rules for an ICT, there's no critical skills. It's a straightforward 2-year work permit, but you need to prove that no Namibian can do the job, which obviously in certain professions is fairly easy because Namibia firstly only has 2.2 million inhabitants, and second of all, there's a huge skills gap, especially for more modern jobs and especially oil and gas industry related. So then it's fairly easy to fulfill the advertisement criteria.
And how long is the lead time then roughly for each of these applications? I hear you talking about advertising and stuff.
So the short-term lead time is quick. I mean, our office does it in 24 hours. If we have all the documents, we just chew them, and then our office in Windhoek submits them, etc. So that's fairly simple. Long-term, so the advertisement, I'm not quite sure. I think it needs to be advertised for at least 7 days, I think. And then there needs to be potential interviews. So the lead time for long term are usually at least 4 weeks, most likely 6 weeks. They don't have a SACA requirement, so they don't have a authority which looks at the qualifications. So that's good. But I would say realistically 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. And is there an additional residence requirement?
No. So like basically all countries in Southern Africa, at least. Not Mozambique, it's also Southern Africa, but at least like South Africa, Namibia doesn't distinguish between work and residence. So your right to work contains the right to reside. There is no additional step for residence. Okay. There's no alien ID card like in Kenya or Uganda. There's nothing like that.
Okay. And what obligation does the employer have once the employment ends?
You're supposed to notify the authorities that the employment relationship has ended. It's a formal notification which we submit to the authorities.
Okay. And now maybe moving on to families. Yeah. So what options does Namibia offer for applicants that come and enter Namibia with family members?
So let's start with the spouse. So that would be an accompanying spouse visa. You need to be married. So that's, I think, important. And then the children, depending on age, need a study permit. There's one Namibia-specific thing. They only open the study visa application periods, I think, from September to December every year. So if you arrive in February, the schools know that you don't get a study visa. So they allow you to go to school on a normal parent accompanying visa. And then in September, you need to then queue or use our services to apply for a study permit. But that's the two accompanying. There's no parents, no fragile care. Sure, that's extra motivated. But in principle, that's your immediate family.
Okay, and I heard that you said obviously that they need to be married.
Yes.
And do they allow for married homosexual couples?
No. So no, and they also don't allow for life partnerships or common law. I think no life partnerships.
Okay. And do any of these work visa categories offer fast track options to permanent residency?
No. Namibia doesn't have that because they only have the one and. I think usually they look at least for 5 years of work permits until you might be able to qualify for permanent residence based on work. Okay. Investors different, but that's not the topic of this video. So.
Okay. And are there any red flags or anything in particular you want to point out that our listeners need to be aware of?
No, compared to other African countries, the document requirements are fairly simple. We can certify lots. There's not too many formalities, like in Mozambique where this is stamped and that is stamped. There's not a lot of steps. The costs are very low, so that's also not a red flag. I know I'm giving all the advantages now instead of red flags. But I think if the lead time is long enough and you have professional help, and as I said, the advertisement I think is one obstacle. No, there's no other red flags worth mentioning.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Andreas. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned some useful information about Namibia. Please make sure you follow us on YouTube. You leave a like and a comment and reach out to us on many of our channels that are at the bottom of the page, and we would love to hear from you.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.